Hello, my sisters, and welcome to my channel, which I have titled Sister Stories, Ageless Christian Inspiration, where we are transforming lives through faith, wisdom, and wellness, using storytelling as our medium, and the Holy Bible is our foundation. These videos are not designed to be academic or theology degree level resources. While I strive to honor the spirit of the original biblical texts, elements of my storytelling are interwoven with details from my own imagination. This creative approach is intended to make God's Word more relatable and easier to understand and apply to your everyday life. The settings may not reflect the historical context of the Bible, the clothing may not match the styles of that era, and the language and music reflect the influence of my own lifetime. I pray that you will enjoy. I pray they make a positive impact and perhaps even be transformative in some way. Thank you so much for visiting, and please continue to come. Peace and blessings, Cheryl. Enjoy.
Good afternoon, ladies. We are gathered here today for a very special encounter with one of Scripture's most inspiring figures. In just a moment, we'll be joined by someone whose journey took her from obscurity to royalty, from an orphan to a queen, all under the guiding hand of God. Her life story teaches us about courage, faith, and the remarkable ways our Creator orchestrates every detail for His purposes. From the pages of the Bible comes a woman who risked her life to save her people, a woman who reminds us that even in perilous times, God can use anyone to fulfill His will. Today, she's here to share her powerful story and the timeless lessons she's learned along the way. So open your hearts and get ready for an unforgettable time of encouragement and inspiration. So, without further ado, please help me welcome Queen Esther.
Hello, my sisters. My name is Esther. Yes, the very Esther whose story you can find in the 17th book of the Old Testament, sandwiched between Nehemiah and Job. In fact, I am one of the only two women who have a book in the Bible named after them, and the other one, of course, is Ruth. My book is also one of the only two books in Scripture where the name of God does not appear, but we see His hand everywhere. Today, I want to share my journey with you. Though centuries separate us, the lessons I learned about courage, discernment, faith, resilience, advocacy, purpose, and of course, God's sovereignty are just as relevant today as they were more than 25 years ago. I invite you to step back in time with me in the Persian Empire, where I was thrust into a royal court full of intrigue, danger, and ultimately divine destiny. After my parents died, I was an orphan, raised by my cousin Mordecai in exile in a foreign land. We were Jews living in Persia, serving a king named Ahasuerus. Some called him Xerxes. One day, everything changed. Queen Vashti, the king's wife, fell out of favor, and under the direction of his advisors, she was disposed. And before long, the king's officials were searching for a new queen, someone who could capture his heart and stand beside him on the throne. I never imagined I'd be chosen. I was just an ordinary girl with a hidden Jewish identity. But, as I would come to understand, God had a purpose for me from the beginning. Day by day, I went through beauty treatments and preparations along with many other women. Yet, out of everyone, it was I who received the royal crown. That turn of events seemed miraculous. Little did I realize how significant my place in the palace would become. Not long after I became a queen, a new official rose to prominence. Haman, who was now second in command, was elevated by the king, and everyone was instructed to bow in his presence. But Mordecai, my dear cousin and guardian, who was also a government official, wasn't having that. He refused to bow. He was steadfast in honoring the one true God and He alone. And as a Jew, he was not to bow to an Amalekite, even though this was the king's edict. This act of disobedience infuriated Haman. In fact, I believe it was set up from the beginning. He knew Mordecai would never bow to him. Haman wanted a reason to get rid of him and ultimately get rid of us all. He wasn't content to punish only Mordecai, though. His hatred was bigger than that. You see, he was an Agagite, a descendant of the line of the Amalekites, and they hated my people. Do you remember back in 1 Samuel, God had given instruction to King Saul through the prophet Samuel to destroy the Amalekites? But the instruction was not totally regarded, and as a result, the Amalekites continued to grow, along with their hatred for my people. He wanted blood. He wanted to destroy us all. Unbeknown to me, this awful man, Haman, deceived King Xerxes and convinced him to issue a decree ordering my people, our annihilation. Haman cast lots to get a date, and the edict was sealed. You can imagine my horror when Mordecai sent word to me about this impending disaster. And suddenly, my position as queen took on a chilling significance. But what on earth could I do? I mean, really, what could I do? I was born Hadassah, the Jew. These were my people against who Haman stood. But now, the king, my husband, had no idea of my roots. To him, I was Esther. But more importantly than that, he has strict rules against anyone approaching him without first having been summoned. My doing so could undoubtedly get me killed just as quick as he disposed Vashti. So approaching him was risking my life, but not approaching him would be turning my back on my people. Amid my fear and uncertainty, Mordecai's words reached me like an echo of God's own voice. He said, "Who knows whether you have come to this kingdom for such a time as this?" That question cut to my heart. Could it be that I became queen precisely to stand in the gap, to be part of God's rescue plan? This message applies to every woman today. You might be wondering about your own purpose in life, questioning whether you really matter or if your gifts are significant. But rest assured, my sisters, God has planted you where you are for a reason. So though my heart pounded with fear, I answered Mordecai, "Gather all the Jews and fast for me, and so will I. Then I will go to the king, though it be against the law, and if I perish, I perish." This was a pivotal moment for me. You see, trusting God doesn't mean we ignore the danger or pretend that fear doesn't exist. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward despite it. But my sisters, before moving forward, you must strategize. You got to have a plan. And once I decided that preserving my own safety was not more important than protecting my people, and once I believed wholeheartedly that God has indeed ultimately been in control this whole time and will remain in control, risking my life became worth it. If I perish, I perish. It's important to understand the interplay of God's sovereignty and our free will. Mordecai believed God would save our people one way or another. But I still had a choice that I had to make. Either step up or shrink back. You've heard it said, go big or go home. God doesn't force us, He invites us. We cooperate with His plan when we obey His leading. In my life, I saw how everything from Queen Vashti's dismissal to my becoming queen was orchestrated for a greater purpose. Yet, none of it would have mattered if I didn't make the choice to intercede with the king. So after we fasted the 3 days, I approached the king in his throne room. My heart was pounding. My palms were sweaty. Yet you know what happened? He extended his golden scepter, sparing my life. But I knew I had to be wise. Haman was still the king's favorite advisor. A rash accusation can cost me everything. So here was my plan. I invited the king and Haman to a banquet. Why a banquet, you ask? Well, you see, in the Persian court, feasts were places of celebration, honor, and personal requests. By inviting the king to a private feast, I hoped he would be more receptive to hearing my petition. In modern terms, it was a strategic move, an intentional delay to build rapport and set the stage. I think that's called godly wisdom, wouldn't you say? After the first banquet, I then invited them to a second banquet, waiting yet another day. This created anticipation and allowed the tension to rise. Meanwhile, Haman grew more arrogant, plotting Mordecai's downfall by erecting a gallows. Finally, at the second banquet, I revealed my identity. And I said, "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, spare my life and the life of my people. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed." Haman was horrified, and the king, enraged. In a dramatic reversal, Haman was condemned to the very gallows he prepared for Mordecai. Now, Haman no longer in the picture. Guess what? The king gave me the estate, and Mordecai was appointed over the estate. And even though the king could not reverse the edict against the Jews, what he did do was to give Haman the authority to write a new decree, granting the Jews the right to defend themselves. What had been a death sentence turned into a day of victory and deliverance. We established the Feast of Purim to remember how God saved us from destruction. Through this festival, generation after generation would recall the mighty hand of God. My sisters, my story may have unfolded in the ancient Persian Empire, but the principles, they remain timeless. These are 5. 1. You were created for such a time as this. In every season, trusting that God placed you where you are for a reason. 2. True bravery isn't the lack of fear, but facing it head on with faith. Sometimes you have to take risks, standing for what is right or caring for someone in need, even when the cost is high. 3. God is always at work behind the scenes, weaving circumstances for His glory and for your good. But your obedience matters too. When you sense God nudging you to act, don't hesitate. Get on it. 4. My decision to hold 2 banquets was carefully planned. When you need to confront a challenge in your life, pray and seek the best way to approach it. Combining faith and practical wisdom actually works. And number 5, mark the moments when God answers your prayers and rescues you from trials, whether big or small. Celebrating God's faithfulness builds gratitude and hope for the future. In conclusion, my sisters, if you remember nothing else, please hold on to these 2 verses from my story. Esther 4:14, where Mordecai reminds me that I'm here for a purpose, and Esther 4:16, where I embrace courage despite my fears. Both of these verses can be applied to your own life today. God has placed you in this moment for a reason, and He will empower you when you step forward in faith. My sisters, thank you for joining me on this journey. This has been my story, but remember, you have a story that is yet to be told. Maybe the lessons I've learned can fuel your own faith and help you see that even in the most uncertain times, you're never alone, and you too have been called for such a time as this. Until next time, dear sisters, walk in faith, embrace your calling, and never forget, God's grace can turn what looks like defeat into your greatest victory, especially during this, your golden season. God bless you, my sisters. I love you. Bye for now.